Thank you very much, and I will now recognize Mr. Green for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I thank the ranking member. I also thank Ms. Biggert for her efforts. Madam Chair, I am eager to hear from witnesses because I'm concerned about the Section 8, the 811 recipients who are to receive these vouchers, possibly being put in a position where they're not getting the amount of service and help that they merit, because when the program was, the vouchers were reissued, some non-disabled persons may have received some of the services intended for disabled persons. That is of concern, and I'm trusting that this legislation will cure these ills that the program is suffering from. I'm also concerned about the gap financing that some of the persons who are interested in providing the services are having to experience. And the project-based rental assistance only demonstration is something that I'd like to hear the witnesses give us opinions about. So I thank you, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you very much. Representative Biggert for 3 minutes. Thank you very much, Mr. Green.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, every now and then and again, you just have to testify. I absolutely believe that Ms. Biggert and Mr. Murphy, that they are doing God's work, and I just have to say it. The well-off and the well-heeled, the well-to-do, they will always fare well. It is the least, the last, and the lost that we really have to work hard to help, because they don't have the lobbyists and they don't have the support system that others will have. And I just want to thank the two of them for doing what they are doing today, because in my heart, I believe that at some place on the infinite continuum that we know as time, we will all have to account for our time right here. And I think that you're going to get some extra CRA credit for what you're doing today. So I thank both of you for what you're doing. And I would like to address my first question to Mr. I believe it is Shelburne. Is that correct, sir? Did you indicate that we are doing this with buildings that are already being constructed? Let me just go through this so that I can make what appears to be clear, conspicuously clear. You're saying that we have a builder who's already constructing apartments, and you will approach this builder and say, we'd like to give you a credit, a tax credit, if you will set aside a certain number of units for persons who are disabled. Is that the way it's working?
Almost. What happens is the developer finds the site, for example, and it can accommodate, say, 64 units. And they will then apply to us for the low-income housing tax credit to subsidize the construction of those 64 units. And as a requirement of receiving those credits, they have to set aside 7 of those 64 for people that are referred by the human services community.
Here is one thing that I suspect you know, but I'm just picking up. You solve the problem of location when you do this. Location has become a real problem in terms of helping people with disabilities. For whatever reasons, we have people who don't want certain projects in their neighborhoods. But by placing this within that project, a project that's going to be built anyway, you now have the location problem resolved because you have it confined within what is a market-based venture, generally speaking. Has that been your experience?
Absolutely. There is still some localized opposition to affordable housing in general, but there's never any opposition to these 10% set-aside units, because that's never part of the story that is related, because really this is just a tax credit property that's providing workforce housing. And so in the event there is localized opposition, you have a developer that has the capacity to respond to that.
Now, for the record, I'd like to do this, just so that we'll have it in the record. Is it true that you, and each of you, that you support this piece of legislation. If this is the case, would you kindly extend a hand? I don't mean to have you do something so simplistic, but I want to make sure that we have everybody on record. All right. For the record, everyone on this panel supports this piece of legislation. And I want that to be made known that we have an entire panel. This is a unique occurrence. An entire panel supports this piece of legislation, which is important, by the way. It's important. And finally, let me just ask this. I know that you've given us great information. The insight that you've accorded us is a blessing. It really is. But is there something more that you would have us do, any one of you, to make this piece of legislation even better? I think that my colleagues have done an outstanding job, but is there something else that anyone would want to call to our attention that we might do to tweak it? Anyone? Yes, ma'am.
I would love the report language to make sure that HUD throws out all 400 pages of the 811 guidance that now exists.
Report language.
Yes.
Okay.
I think that would be very helpful to make sure that HUD really does change what their current policies are on the processing of these grants.
Anyone else? Yes, sir.
I can't leave it unsaid. More money for the program.
Okay. I think that's a good point. I will close with this comment, if I may. Listen, those of you who are concerned about 200 pages going in, 2 years to come out, I sincerely believe that something will happen in and around November of this year that will change that. I just believe it. Thank you very much, and I yield back.
Well, Mr. Murphy, in this infinite continuum of time, you will be our last questioner.
With that, the chair now recognizes the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Green, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Wilcherson, is that correct? You mentioned a total, I believe, of 92 recommendations that were made to TVA. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And the representative from TVA, I think you responded to 19 of the 92. Is
Yes,
that?
the difference is because we're issuing 2 reports today. One that is publicly available, and that report has 19 recommendations in it. We're also issuing a limited official use only report, which contains more details and specifics about the individual findings that we identified. And in that report, we are making 73 recommendations.
Right, but my assumption is that you believe that all 92 of them should be addressed.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so let me go over to Mr. McCollum. Is that correct, sir?
That's correct.
Okay, Mr. McCollum, you don't, if there's something about this that you can't say publicly, I understand, but you addressed only 19 of the 92. Could you kindly define addressed, please? Addressed could simply mean that you've looked at it and you decided that it was something that you'll get around to, and it could mean that you've completely corrected the situation. The 73 recommendations concern specific information security weaknesses that should be corrected. So how do you address them, please? Yes, sir. Let me, if I may, let me go back to Mr. Wilcherson. Sir, have you had an opportunity to see the proposed action plan?
Not the specific action plans. We have received responses from TVA that they made in response to our report, which is included in our reports. But as a matter of GAO policies and in accordance with government auditing standards, we will go back later to verify the corrective actions that TVA has taken or will take on these actions and on our recommendations.
Okay. Are these actions that should be taken within the next 10 years?
I would hope so.
Within
Yes,
the next?
I think that many of them should be taken immediately. And as Mr. McCollum indicated, some already have been taken and that they've completed actions on some of them.
Should they all be finished within the next 10 years?
I would think so, yes.
Should they be finished within the next 5 years?
I would think with most of our recommendations,
Should they be
yes.
finished within the next 3 years?
Probably so, the recommendations we're making.
And will you, in continuing your audit, provide information as to how the action plan is progressing? Is that information that we can receive?
We can certainly work with your staff to provide that information, yes.
Those things that should be done immediately, I assume we'll make them priority one. I assume that they are priority one for a reason. And are you finding that any of these priority one items are not being addressed, what we will call timely?
At this point, we have not gone back to verify the actions taken by TVA on our recommendations. So I can't comment as to whether or not the actions have been completed. All we have at this point are assertions by TVA that they've taken action or plan to take actions.
I have about 8 seconds. How long do you think it will take you to verify what has been indicated has been done currently?
It would not take us too long if we were to go out and conduct our tests.
It's not too long, 2 weeks, or is it 2 months?
It could be 2 weeks to do the work, but we would not necessarily be able to go out in 2 weeks to do that, given our other workload and activities and commitments that we have.
Thank you. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.